Hey Dad, hey Greg, hey y'all. Welcome back to Wrench at Wheelin. Well, as you can see, I have the Jeep put back together. New radiator came in and it was packaged much better than the first one was because it has fragile or fragile written on the side of it and on the front. So it came in, pretty impressed with it. I'll show you, what all went into getting that in here in just a little bit, but the radiator really looks good. I did buy it off of eBay, and the radiator is nice. It's a nice radiator, and it's doing a good job. I took it wheeling the day after I got the radiator put in, and it was a long night, which you will see, but got that put in, and I am happy with it. So we'll have that, and just to let you know a few things that I've been doing, been trying to work on all my other vehicles, my wife's car, my daughter's car. My daughter drives a small Ford SUV, and it had steering problems. It has electric steering, not power steering like fluid and pump and all that stuff. So inside, the steering wheel comes down through the column into a box underneath the dash, and that box it's got a little motor on one side, and then inside that box it's got a disc that is called the torque sensor or the steering angle sensor. And when you turn the wheel, it sends a message to the motor, and the motor drives a worm drive in there, and that drives the shaft that goes down to the rack and pinion. So when that goes out, you are fighting not only the steering in like a regular manual steering car, but you're also fighting that little worm gear. So it's even harder to turn than regular manual steering is with nothing. So my daughter was driving and it cut out on her. So she pulled over, turned it off, turned it back on, started working. She drove a little further, it did it again. So she turned around and came back home. And so I had to get that little disc. Everything that I saw online was saying that disc is more than likely the problem. So bought that little disc, and it's kind of a process to get that thing put in, because you have to pull the steering column off, and then once you do that, it's the snout of that little box down there. It almost looks like a transmission, manual transmission. It's got a splined shaft that comes out, and that shaft also has a snout on it that goes around it that the steering column actually slides down on. So you have to pull that snout off of it, and then that disc is down under that. And you have to line up two arrows. You have to make sure that it doesn't move when you're pulling that disc off there, because you're only allowed about 5 degrees of difference. So you put the new one on there, make sure that it lines up with the arrow on the spline shaft, and then you pull the little pin that keeps that thing from the disc from moving inside its little case during shipping. And then the pin, the hole where the pin went through, that has to stay within a tiny little window, and with no resistance or anything. It's pretty complicated. So I got all that done, got it put back together, and it started working. So I had to program it, but that was kind of one of the things I had to do. And then my wife's car, her windows, the power windows, she drives an '07 GM, and the window buttons on those, I had a work truck that was an '07, and it did the same thing. The windows just quit working. It's not the motor, it's more than likely the switch. So they're, you know, when they started going out, you could push it and it wouldn't work, and then you push it a few more times and finally it'd work. I don't know if whenever it makes that connection down in there that it arcs and leaves a little something on the little metal pads in there, but so I pulled all those window switches out, and you can break them apart, and they've got a little silicone pad in there that has little metal dots on it that are supposed to make that connection to tell the window to go up or down whenever you push the button. So got in there, pulled that apart, got some electronic parts cleaner, sprayed that on them, you know, rubbed them, scrubbed them down a little bit, and kind of took a little razor blade and just barely scrubbed it with the edge of the razor blade and got everything cleaned up, put them back together, and they all worked. So it wasn't terribly expensive to put new switches in, 75 bucks I think it was. But rather than do that, I like to see if I can fix something first. So about $11 in electronics parts cleaner and a little bit of time, and all the windows work as good as new. So I like to do it that way instead of just going ahead and buying new buttons. We'll see how long they work. They may not work for very long, but they may work for the rest of the time we have the vehicle too. So it's just kind of one of those things where I don't like to spend the money if I don't have to. So, but we'll go ahead and I'll get to the video of putting the radiator back in here, and I'll put a little bit of the ride that we went on Saturday at the very end. It wasn't anything too technical. It was just a bunch of us out riding. It was up in Tennessee, but we were just a bunch out riding and having a good time. And there was, you know, there were a few obstacles, but the one I'll show you is about the only one that was really worth filming. So won't make a whole show out of it, but anyway, here it goes. And thanks for watching, everybody, and hope you enjoy.
Nothing immoral. One eternity later.
So I got it all put back together, and you can just barely see any of the aluminum radiator in there. But it is a pretty good looking unit. I'm sure it's Chinese, but it looks pretty good. Did a good job on all their welds, and looks good. Now I did have to modify these pieces a little bit. So when you put a 2-inch wide radiator in your JK, get that out of the way. This is the full 2-inch radiator. So when you put that in, you have to, down in the bottom, there's another plastic piece that the radiator sits in, and you have to modify that piece. You have to cut a little piece off of it on both sides. So I cut that piece off, and then whenever I went to put this back on, the fan is pushed back a little bit because the radiator cord, instead of being 2 inches, instead of being 1 inch, is now 2 inches. So that pushes this back a little bit. So what I did is I took the button that goes here and the button that goes there, and I used that to, and this button is supposed to go through the fan shroud and hold it together. But with this being the way it is and thicker and pushing the fan back, I just took one of those pieces that I cut off down below and cut this, one of these buttons, the little spear piece that goes down through there, cut it off a little bit, just enough to where it will hold the piece that I cut and modified. So that holds the fan up here on the top on both sides and gives it, still looks real factory, or pretty factory. I may end up putting 2 more on here later on, but that's the way it looks. So pretty impressed with it, and I think it's gonna work out just fine. I like having that extra cooling capacity, and everything fits back in there pretty well. The only other thing I had to modify was right down in, well, let me see if I can get down to it, the air box, right down there where this comes through, where it meets the corner. Am I gonna be able to get this? Okay, so I went and got a light. So if you look right down in there, on the right-hand side, I modified the fan shroud a little bit, just ground a little bit off of it. And then on the left-hand side, That's where I modified the air box, ground a little bit off of it. Made sure I didn't cut into the lip so that air would leak around it. But I had to grind part of the lip off of it. But it still does seal against the air filter. So that's the only modifications that I really had to make to get this radiator in. It wasn't bad at all. So if you need a radiator put in your JK, I'm going to recommend the 2-inch radiator from eBay, and that's all the modifications that I had to make. Now my Jeep is an 07, so it's pretty much the same all the way up to 11, I believe, and then 12 I think they went to the 3.6. But that's what it looks like. I think it looks good. So whew. Well guys, I got to put back together, and it is about 12:30. So if I plan on getting up and getting into the woods in the morning, I better get some sleep. I have to say the hardest part was probably getting the new radiator to line up with the transmission cooler, which the transmission cooler is in front instead of the air conditioner cooler being in front. On this, the transmission cooler is, so trying to get that lined up with the new radiator, it was a job. The lines come around the bottom edge of it, and there's 2 little brackets, and the metal lines have to go in with those brackets, and then you have to get everything lined up. It was a job, but got everything done. New radiator, looks good, a whole lot nicer, and I think it's going to do a lot better job. So hopefully I can get out in the woods, maybe get a little footage of that tomorrow. I don't know if it'll be in this video or another one, but I am tired and I am going in and going to bed. So appreciate it, guys. Have a good one. Have a good week. God bless.